new cost. Forget the improvements. That's new cost, new basis. You got the program. You find out what it was worth. And you take an average, it'll show what, medium price, high, low. You take the medium. Unless the house is in really good shape, take the medium. That's her new basis. All of a sudden she owes nothing because she's got a $250,000 exclusion. She thought she was going to owe a lot of money. Now she owes nothing. He just rode in on a white horse with a white hat. Okay? Yes, sir.
Question on this property that was a rental. Her husband did die 3 years ago. They purchased it many years ago for $19,000. Husband died 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Would it be
Stepped up basis based on the time he died. She has no tax to pay. None. Zero. Not only that, if you inherit property, your kids inherit the property, they get a brand new basis and depreciation starts all over again. You don't have to worry about the old depreciation. It starts all over again. So this person who died, they'll owe no taxes on it because 2 years ago the price was probably worth more, huh? A little bit more. So get a property profile out, do that on the day he died.
She's also selling her primary residence. Does it matter?
This is for every single piece of property that person owns. Any piece of property that person owns gets a full stepped up basis. No exception.
Is
Yes.
that regardless of the way they take title, or do they have to take title as community property?
The only time it wouldn't affect that is if they filed married filing separately, and the property was in the wife's name and not the husband's name, would not get a stepped up basis. But most people don't file married filing separate unless there's a major reason, and usually that's for tax purposes, but there could be a problem with that, okay? They would have to have the property in joint tenancy. Joint tenancy is very important. If it's not joint tenancy, there is a potential problem. Thank you, good question. Yes, sir.
Is there a difference in the percent of how much they're going to be taxed if the property is put into a trust first?
No, no. And when you call me, you tell me the property was in trust. Trust doesn't mean anything until that person dies. It means nothing. No lender will deal with a trust. Nobody wants to deal with a trust until that person dies. That trust doesn't even take a breath until that person stops breathing. So the trust, you've got a piece of property and you're going to sell it and it's in trust, so what? You've got a quick claim deed out of the trust, put it in their names, acquire the next property in their names, and put it back in the trust. That's simple. Trust doesn't mean anything until they die. Now it's important. Okay? Another question. Yes?
You said you had to see the taxes if they were going to be selling it. How many years taxes? Just one or the last year?
Bring me just the last year. If you have the last 2 years, the more information you give me, the better it is. But at least if you give me the current year, that'll give me an idea of how much depreciation it took that year. They've owned it for 10 years. My computer can multiply that times 10. And then I figure out exactly how much depreciation they've taken. You had a question?
Is there any deadline to the stepped-up basis?
No.
So they can, if it's 100 years later, they can still...
It doesn't matter how far back you can go to figure out what they paid for that property when they bought it. It doesn't matter. That law, the code section is 1014. That code section has not changed in a long time. That stepped up basis is really important. You had a question, sir? Don't fight over it, guys. Who wants to talk?
The title you said, joint tenancy, how will community property request?
Joint tenancy or community property is the same thing. Won't make any difference. The only time there's a difference if it's sold on separate property. Now we got a problem. Neil, you had another question?
So going back to, because this question's been coming up more and more recently, with primary residence, we've had a number of people that have bought a piece of property recently as a primary residence, and they're making a few dollars on it, and they want to sell it. So are there any time frames, you have to live in a certain period of time, etc., to qualify for the...
You know, you have to at least have lived in it for 2 years. Last 2 years in a row, or 3 out of the last 5. So let's say the last 2 years. In order to take the $500,000 exclusion or the $250,000 exclusion. One of the things we're seeing is that people that bought property 2 or 3 years ago took the $8,000 exclusion. Remember that? That's that first-time home buyer's credit. And they lost the house before the 3 years were up. If the house went into foreclosure, they can get out of the paying. They don't have to repay the $800,000. The $8,000. They don't have to repay that. if they just wanted to buy a bigger house because they didn't like that house anymore, now they got a problem. But let's say one of them lost their jobs, there's exceptions. One of them lost a job, or they went through a divorce, they may not have to pay the $8,000 back. So those are the kind of things I need information on, and I can help you tell your client that they don't have to repay it. And the government will know that they owe it, so they got to put it on the Form 5405 that says, no, I don't owe it because. When you have those kind of problems with people, call me and talk to me. If your own tax man is not available, I don't have to say, well, I'll look it up and I'll call you back. Call me and talk to me. Neil.
So, I keep going back to this primary residence, because the issue is that if somebody made $50,000 and it's under the 2 years, they would have to pay ordinary income.
That's right.
Okay, so that would get taxed on their ordinary income. What's the capital gains? Well, the capital gains rate is there's nothing as long as there's 50.
Yeah, what we're talking about difference in capital gain rates and ordinary income. Ordinary income means it's taxable at your tax rate. Capital gains is better because it's only taxed at 30% federal and state. Only taxed at 30% federal and state. Anytime you can move something over to the capital gains section instead of the ordinary section, it is to your advantage. But if your client just gets rid of the house and maybe doesn't even want to buy another one, doesn't want to do anything, they got a profit. But on $50,000, if they lived in it for less than 2 years and they don't have a reason for moving, they're going to pay taxes on that $50,000. It's going to cost them.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir, in the back.
In 2 years, you'll full 24 months.
Full 24 months and 1 day, yes.
And then,
20
do you have the option as a taxpayer to move it from the capital gains to the ordinary income?
Well, what you can do is you can sell the property, but you got to make sure it closes 24 months and 1 day in order to stay within the 2-year period.
Right, but as far as the proceeds, the gain of, do you have the option, tax liability-wise, to put it either under a capital gain or an ordinary income?
No. Whatever, if you've owned the property for more than a year, then it would go into capital gain. And you would want it to go into capital gain. Yes?
Do you have to be married to the same person to get the $500,000 deduction?
That's a good one.
Could we add them all together?
Yeah, let's add them all together. There you go. That's why this job is never boring. You have to be married to the same person. What you have to do is you both have to have lived in that house and owned it for a full 2 years in order to take it.
You can't go quick.
If only one of you lived in it, that person's going to get a $250,000 exclusion. That's it. You have to own it and live in it, which means you have to be on title. Now, a lot of times, wife owns the house or the husband owns the house, and they didn't put it in each other's names, but they file joint returns every year. That would qualify for the $500,000 exclusion, as long as they both lived in it and owned it for 2 years. Both of them own it and live in it for 2 years.
Do they have to be married for those 2 years?
Well, California law is different than federal law. If they're not married, then they're not filing a joint return, and they're both on title, and they both have ownership. Then they file single. Each one of them takes $250,000. Okay, so like maybe 3 people own a house together, and they all live in it and own it for that whole time. They each get a $250,000 exclusion. Okay, each of them. So they're not married. That's okay, but they got to have ownership and live in it for the full 2 years. Let's say they just put one of the people just went on title about 2 months before they sold it. That person doesn't qualify. Didn't own it or live in it for 2 years. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, and going back to the stepped-up basis,
Yes.
The way I had learned it, and I might be wrong, but the owners get the stepped-up basis if they took title as a community property or community property as a sole survivorship. But if they had anything else other than that, had taken title any other way other than that, such as joint tenancy or anything else, then when one spouse died,
If they live in California, they're going to get a full step-up basis.
regardless of the way they.
That's right. The reason they probably have it in tenants in common is because they probably set up a trust.
Okay.
Okay? Joint tenancy circumvents a trust. So whenever you have a trust done, the attorney will always put it in tenants in common, because joint tenancy circumvents a trust. That's the only reason they did that. There's no problem with that because that's probably what they did. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't do that. They probably wouldn't put it as tenants in common. So what they've done is they've set up a trust and an attorney has put it in the trust. That's probably why they did that. So it does qualify without a problem at all. Good questions. I want to thank you for all those good questions. What else you got? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. My client sold a rental property here, and then they want to buy a property in La Jolla for the kids to run it out, just like what you mentioned earlier. Is it possible, because if you buy something in La Jolla, they might be able to buy a type of condo instead of a single-family residence?
Okay, a condo is a single-family residence. As long as it's not personal residence, it qualifies. I don't care, La Jolla's still in the United States, still California, so it works. That's okay. Somebody else had a question a little earlier about, and I told you to bring that question up when we were talking.
This is regarding the property where if they have the first and the second, and that pays for the equity that they have. However, they have a federal and state tax lien.
Okay.
So in order to close the transaction, basically, so then the lenders won't foreclose, she filed BK. Question, would she be able to file BK? She has an equity of $67,000, however, she owed $150,000. So what would be the best way to handle that?
I mean, according to title.
But how much money do they owe the government? How much money do they owe the government?
Well, 150.
Okay.
And the extra proceed is 67,000.
Okay. What we do in something like that, we do an offer and compromise. And last year, I was averaging 2 to 3 offers and compromises a month. We now are doing anywhere from 10 to 15 a month. The new laws have changed. People that owe a lot of money to the government can now make deals that they never made before. In the last 2 weeks, I've had 4 of them accepted. The biggest one was $350,000. We settled for $48,000. The smallest one was $57,000. We settled for $4,200. Another one I just got accepted was a real estate agent who owed $165,000. We settled for $22,000. I don't remember what the other one was, but they're all. I deal with all kinds of offers and compromises. So if you know somebody that owes more money than they can afford to pay, and they got liens and all kinds of problems, I need to see what's going on. Then I can tell if they need to file BK or if an offer and compromise would be better. And without seeing what's going on, I can't tell. And I only deal with the federal government. The Franchise Tax Board is very difficult to do an offer and compromise or make a deal with them. They're very hard to do business with. For whatever reason, it doesn't make a difference. They're very difficult to work with. The people I talk with on the phone act like it's their money and that we owe it, okay? So, but with the IRS has altogether different rules, completely different rules. You know, on a foreclosure or a short sale, the state of California passed a law a year ago that on debt forgiveness, you know, cancellation of debt, your client gets that 1099-C, heard those?
Right.
If it's a rental property and it's 4 units or less, the state of California will not tax them on the debt forgiveness. You don't have to worry about them being insolvent. The state of California will not tax them on it. Federal government might, but the state of California, as long as they're a resident and the property is California property, the state of California will not charge them on the cancellation of debt. But on the federal government, if they have a cancellation of debt, now we got a tax problem. I need to know if they're insolvent. I have an insolvency worksheet, so if you got somebody that owes a lot of money to the government, send them in to me. Let me talk to them. Let me find out if they have to pay it or not. Sometimes they don't owe it. Sometimes we can get them out of it. I need to see what's going on. I do amended returns all the time for people that come and say, hey, somebody just told me that I may not have to pay the tax I paid. I owe the government $45,000 because of cancellation of debt. I look at their tax return and I look at their financials and I work out, I said, you don't owe any money. I amend the returns, they don't owe anything. A real estate agent, not from this office, but another office, went in on his own. Had a cancellation of debt. He came back and talked to me and it said, the auditor said he owed $72,000. So this young couple owed $72,000 because they had debt forgiveness. I says, really? I looked at it and I said, so I saw the auditor, I happen to know who she is. So I called her up, didn't have power of attorney, but I said, I don't have power of attorney on this, Angelina, but you made a big mistake. She said, what's that? I said, you didn't include the loss. Sometimes, if the cancellation of debt may equal a loss on the sale of the property, one offsets the other. So when they got done, I just made that little change and And the IRS auditor sent her a new report, they didn't know anything, and I charged the client $250. If you've got tax problems, let me see what's going on. Let me see what's happening. Sometimes I can take care with a phone call or a quick computation and make some changes. But if any of you are ever audited, and you want to represent yourself, might just shoot yourself in the foot first, and then go and see how much fun you're going to have. You don't stand a chance. Now these new rules they got going on, and I handle audits, and my clients, I never take my client with me. Never! God forbid they open their mouth and say something. And I spend the next 30 minutes explaining what they said because they really didn't mean it. And my clients, you don't have to deal with the client, with the IRS, you don't have to talk to them. I have a client that owes a lot of money, and he says they've been calling him. I need to know who's calling him. I need to know if this person's a revenue agent or revenue officer or tax compliance officer. It makes a major difference. You wouldn't know the difference. It would make a difference to you. It does to me. When you have problems, you got liens, you got levies, you got nasty letters, let me see what's going on. If I can't help you, I'm not going to charge you. Yes, ma'am.
When you do that offer and compromise, when you negotiate, you gotta have cash ready, right?
No, good question, thank you. The new laws on offers and compromises. This one guy that owed $4,200, $4,800, whatever it was. We made a deal to pay $800 5 times within 1 year, paid it off. It's now a 1-year program. 5 payment, 1-year program. Every other month you gotta send him money, whatever the amount is. The client that owes $22,000, he has to pay, divide it by 5, and he's gotta make a payment every other month for 1 year.
But that's even when you negotiate at a lower price.
That's when we negotiate, and that's what I do. I'm the negotiator. This one client told him that he's gonna owe, when he came in to me, I said, you're gonna owe about $20,000 when we get done. So we offered him 12. IRS agent calls back, at the upper room compromise office calls back and says, we can't accept 12. I said, what do you want? She says, $22,000. Guy owed 167. I said, $22,000, my God, let me see if I can talk my client into it. I'm going, yes! I call my client up, he says, my God, sign. You know? So, but if you do an offer and compromise, all of your tax returns gotta be filed. You have to pay quarterly taxes. You gotta do everything, and you gotta be perfect for 5 years. If you don't think you can be perfect for 5 years, don't waste your money and my time. You gotta file on time, and you gotta pay your tax that you owe. And you gotta pay quarterly estimated taxes. Now I know most all of you are paying estimated taxes, right? You all do that, right?
Of course.
Yeah, right. Okay, another question.
You mentioned about the step-up basis for surviving spouse.
Yeah,
Do they have to file anything when the...
no, when you do the tax return on that property, next to that property, the depreciation schedule, I put SUB. It does not stand for submarine, okay? Stepped up basis, that's all we have to do.
So when you file it, not even when you sell the property?
No, sir.
When you file the tax...
That's right. When you receive that property and you're going to use new depreciation, then I put the address of the property, I put SUB. There's a little box in the computer I check, so it's stepped up basis, and it tells them what we're doing.
So if you don't, and that's at the time of the sale, so if you inherit the property today, but you don't sell it for 3 years, I wouldn't put that, I wouldn't show it, well, we might show it on my tax return as.
You'd show it on your tax return, a stepped-up basis, check the box that says inherited property. Your tax preparer would do that, check the box that says inherited property, and then the IRS would automatically know that it's inherited property.
What if you didn't do that?
If you didn't do that, then you could have a problem. But it's very easy to fix it. Very easy to fix that, yeah. So there's ways to get around those problems. Yes, ma'am, we're in the corner. Wait a minute. Speak up and I can hear you better.
Is California still a common law state?
Yeah. California?
Well, you know, when you live together for like 7 years.
Okay, California does not recognize common law.
Not anymore.
No, they never did. California does not recognize common law. Most of the community property states do not recognize common law marriages, which means you live together for 7 years or more. California doesn't recognize that. Okay?
They said they couldn't.
Another question?
We couldn't hear.
All needed to know that, no common law.
Okay, the question was, does California recognize common law marriages? No. California doesn't recognize it. They will recognize it if there's a man, 2 guys or 2 women They got married, okay? Got to get married in California. And then you can file a joint return for California, but you can't file it that way for federal. Federal doesn't recognize the, huh? Same-sex marriage. The federal government doesn't recognize that. California does. Another question over here. Yes, ma'am.
I have a client, this inheritance the property from the parents.
Okay.
In 2008.
Okay.
You want to sell the property. He had paid the property as capital gain.
Okay, the question was, her client just inherited property in 2008 from her parents. Does she have to pay capital gain? I don't know. You haven't told me. You haven't given me one number. Okay. You want me to help you? Like I tell everybody, you got to help me. Give me numbers, and I can tell you if they got a tax file.
The property is already paid off. Right?
Okay. Remember you hear me say mortgages mean nothing? Equity means nothing? You're not writing stuff down. I don't care whether it was paid off.
Okay.
Doesn't mean anything.
I want to sell for 480.
480.
Yes.
What was it worth when they inherited the property?
That time, 2008 is like 350.
That difference would be taxable.
I mean, what about if they're already in a living trust?
Okay. If they inherit property, they get a stepped-up basis. She said the property was worth $350,000 when they inherited it. It's going to sell it for $450,000. They'll pay taxes on $100,000 because you inherited the property through the trust. Okay? No exception. It's that simple. They get a brand new basis from 2008. Compare that to what they sold it for in 2013. That difference is taxable.
But what about if they live in that property?
If they lived in it for that period of time, they get, and they're married? Are they married?
No, he divorced.
Okay, they're single. Then they get a $250,000 exclusion, they pay nothing. Okay? Okay. So inherited property, whether it's one of these or one of these, the rules are absolutely the same. Okay, a lot of good questions here today. I'll be back in my office in about 30 minutes. If you have more questions, call me. You need to file tax returns, call me. Let's make an appointment. Get the tax returns done. I cannot make the IRS go away until you file. That's what you need to do. And I guarantee you there's a bunch of you in here. Okay? It's not possible that every one of you is filed. Thank you.
All right, good job. Earl Salter, excellent job. We need to wrap it up, so.